Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'm right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council. So get those questions in for tomorrow's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Panthers fell to 1-5 to start off the 2024 season. The second time in 3 seasons the Panthers have started off 1-5. They did the same thing back in 2022, changed their head coach to Steve Wilks, and things turned around for the Panthers, and they were right there week 17 on the road against Tampa Bay with an opportunity to win the division. Unfortunately, losing in that de facto NFC South title game on that afternoon, and David Tepper deciding also to not hire Steve Wilks to be his head coach. And now we're back here 2 years later, sitting in the exact same position at 1-5. But Dave Canales is not on the hot seat. They have a new quarterback in Andy Dalton. Is he the long-term answer? Of course not, but he's the answer for right now. And there are plenty of questions about the Panthers. But 2 years ago, all the questions were about the offensive ineptitude, not necessarily on defense, where you looked at pieces like Brian Burns, Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, and thought to yourself, okay, we got something here. Shaq Thompson as well, Dante. There's players on this defense. If only they had an offense, then we could be cooking. And once they figured out an offensive identity, which was ground and pound, the Panthers finally started to win football games with the offense and the defense. The best offensive game in franchise history happened 2 years ago against Detroit with Steve Wilks at the helm as the Carolina Panthers head coach during that same season, where you tell me back earlier in October, September, I would have never believed the Panthers would have an offensive outburst like they had that afternoon on Christmas Eve against the Lions. And now we're sitting here. It's a complete role reversal as the Panthers are again 1-5. But this time around, the offense is fine. It's actually been pretty solid with Andy Dalton as quarterback the last 4 games. It's the defense that is a massive issue and brings the Carolina Panthers to a whole new hell that they're experiencing right now through the first 6 weeks of the season. And I didn't want to do it yesterday because I was just honestly so beaten down by just how demoralizing it is to watch a team that finally figures out who their quarterback's going to be for the time being, finally can move the ball on offense, and then can't stop a nosebleed. I just did not have the energy yesterday to do what I'm going to do now, which is, I told you so. And no, I don't take pleasure in this because I don't want to sit here and talk about a bad Panthers team, but I had to look back at the conversations that we have had over the course of this season and even going back to the summer. But so far this season, after week 1, yeah, Bryce Young was terrible. I didn't sit up here and defend him. But what I did tell you is it doesn't matter who the quarterback is if the Panthers defense is going to allow 9 straight scoring drives. So yeah, Bryce was bad. Yes, the defense also was terrible, and both of them were reasons why the Panthers lost that game. But you're not winning games in the NFL giving up 47 points. Then the second week at home in the opener against the Chargers, Bryce Young again was terrible, held back the offense, again, sat up here, did not defend Bryce Young, said, yes, he's bad, would like for the Panthers to stick with him because he did not do all he did this offseason, sacrifice the defense, bringing all these offensive pieces to bail on Bryce Young after 2 weeks. At least that's what I thought. And again, told you, you can change the quarterback, but if you're giving up 219 rushing yards on the ground, you're not going to win games. And that same day, J.C. Horn said, if you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything in this league. But the Panthers decided, let's make a change. Let's go to Andy Dalton. And we saw a completely renewed team offensively, defensively, and special teams-wise on the road against that Las Vegas Raiders team where they scored 36 points, took care of the ball, held the Raiders to 22. But really, It was only 7 points, as those 2 touchdowns late were all in garbage time, and the game was already over at the end of the third quarter. So I sat there and said, okay, maybe y'all were right. Maybe all it took for the Panthers defense to play well and for the offense to look functional and to actually be able to operate efficiently was just to have Andy Dalton in there. So the defense, they got a break. The offense got their playmakers involved. All was well. But I remain skeptical based off of the fact that they gave 9 straight scoring drives up in the first game against New Orleans and got ran all over in week 2 against the Chargers. Was Andy Dalton enough to explain those performances? What turns out after the last 3 weeks, no, that was not the case, as they gave it 34 against Cincinnati, 36 against the Bears, and 38 on Sunday at home against the Falcons. So, yeah, I kind of told you this would be the possibility of things happening, even if they change the quarterback, because the defense is not good. So should we be surprised by all of this? I certainly, sitting here today, am just aghast at just how bad this defense is. I had to go back and listen to what I had to say back on the podcast in July when I went over the state of the Carolina Panthers defense. And I looked at how they would play in the passing game and the run game, and overall went back, listened to that before recording today's show, just so I'm not sitting over here BSing you and saying things now that I didn't believe then. What I said back then was I thought that the passing defense would be ranked in the 20s, bottom third of the NFL, based on the offense scoring more points, which they have so far, and that would in turn allow the opponent to throw the ball more, which has happened so far this season. I also talk about the inability to rush the passer, which again has been a problem so far this season, and the questions that remained at cornerback at that point in time. So far this season, the Panthers are 27th in the NFL in net yards allowed per attempt in the passing game at 8.0. They're 27th in the yards allowed per attempt at 8.0. They're 31st in net yards allowed per attempt at 7.5. 25th in yards allowed in the passing game, 29th in opponent passer rating, allowing 109.1 on average. They're 31st in sacks, only with 6 so far this year. The Falcons only have 5, and they're dead last in the NFL in pressure percentage at 11.1. So kind of nailed it there, where thought they'd be ranked in the 20s. That's where they're at. Thought they would not be able to get the passer. That's where they're at. And the questions at cornerback, I don't really feel like there's that many questions. I think Mike Jackson actually come in and been fairly admirable the way he's played, especially in that game where they won against Las Vegas. I haven't had a lot of issues with him. I think JC has played well. I think Troy Hill has been fine as well. It's just been they've had injuries. Like Dane Jackson, he hasn't played yet. Maybe he plays this Sunday. We've seen Jordan Fuller also go out. I don't think this has been a bad secondary, but what are you going to expect out of them when there is zero pass rush up front and the team also cannot stop the run? Like, that is not necessarily on them, but we also have seen every single one of those guys in the secondary whiff on a tackle and run support this season. But the guys in the front seven got to do a better job, not even allowing safeties like Xavier Woods come up and try to fit a hole and stop the run, which he failed to do a couple times yesterday, and that's how it so happened a couple times so far this season. Now, looking at the run defense, I felt like the run defense would be improved, and hand up, I got that one wrong. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong about things, but I'm also willing to tell you that maybe I wasn't too far off in something that you may say that I was being negative about. Now sitting here where reality has all slapped us in the face, literally slapping myself in the face here on YouTube, and we're seeing just how bad this defense is. I thought that they would be ranked between 15th to 22nd in the NFL. I really thought there would be an improvement, and this was shocking to me when looking at Pro Football Reference and looking at the stats. Right now, the Panthers are 15th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per attempt at 4.5. Last week, heading into that game against Atlanta, they were 15th according to EPA against the run. And I keep looking at that number, and it keeps not going down week after week. So I don't know what's going on there. But 15th, I felt like 15th to 22nd, and somehow some of those numbers are bearing that out. But when you look at it overall, rushing yards allowed, they're 31st in the NFL. They've allowed 921 yards. Only the Indianapolis Colts are worse, allowing 931 yards allowed on the ground. So I thought it was going to be better. Some of the stats put it right there in the little, what is it, 15, whatever. I can't think of the word, between 15 and 22, whatever the word is for that, in that, I don't know, that range. There we go. That's not what I was thinking of, but in the range I thought they potentially would be at. And, well, overall, they're one of the worst run defenses in the league. But then thinking overall, as far as the defense goes, I thought, looking back in the summer, that they would be in the bottom third of the NFL. And I came out and said, don't want to be negative, just telling you my opinion that I don't think this is going to be a good defense and that they're going to regress if they're regressing at all. And the lack of talent and the guys that they saw walk at the door would be a part of that. And so far, through 6 games this season, the Carolina Panthers are 29th in the NFL in total defense. They're 32nd, which is dead last in points allowed. They're 28th in yards per play allowed. So this has been a bad defense. And even if I may have nailed some of these predictions and surprisingly even been maybe right about one of them where I still feel like I got that wrong as far as an improved run defense, I have my concerns, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad, y'all. I truly didn't. And looking at the fact that Shaq's out for the rest of the season, Derek Brown's out for the rest of the season, and we don't know when DJ Wynnum's going to play. Dane Jackson may come back this week. We'll talk about that here momentarily as I go over what Dave Canales had to say on Monday. I didn't think it'd be this bad. And the injuries don't help. The fact that the talent that exited the door and what replaced it, that doesn't help. I don't think Ejiro Evero should be on the hot seat. This is still a guy who's a brilliant defensive mind. You can only do so much with the talent that's around you and that you have at your disposal. And he did an admirable job last year. If you looked at the stats overall, it really wasn't a good defense. And we talked about this summer. Now you're looking at it this year. It looks far worse, of course, when you with your own eyes. And all the stats now are all aligning to this, not being a great defense. And that's in part because the offense actually scores points and the defense is having to actually have to stop teams that are trying to play from ahead, but also from behind rarely. It's just, it's been bad. It's been frustrating. And I don't know if it's going to get better. And that really is the saddest part about this situation. So I don't want to say I told you so, but I kind of told you so. And I just try to be honest with y'all. It's not about negativity. Want to see the team win. But, I mean, kind of warned you back in the summer. And even for me, didn't think it was going to be this bad. All right, Dave Canales spoke to the media on Monday, as he does following every Panthers game. Give an update on Jonathon Brooks, who could be back practicing this week, and also some other injury updates. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and get so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And looking over at FanDuel.com right now, Carolina Panthers are, 7.5-point underdogs on the road this Sunday against the Washington Commanders. They are plus 320 money line. And the over-under, better than it was last week. I told y'all, set at 46.5. Even when it was at 47.5 early in the week, I said it's going to be over. Points going to be scored. And how many points we have? 58 in that game on Sunday. 52.5 is the over-under on Sunday between the Panthers and Commanders. Both defenses, not bad. Both offenses can capitalize, score points. That's one where I think, again, probably going to hit the over on Sunday. Let's go over to FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks, as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Oh, yeah. And right here in the old North state of North Carolina. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, enough of me being a narcissist. Let's go over and talk about what Dave Canales had to say on Monday following the Carolina Panthers 38-20 loss at home to the Atlanta Falcons. Gave an update on a rookie running back, Jonathon Brooks, who tore his ACL last November playing at Texas. Still, the Panthers took him with the 46th overall pick there in the second round of the 2024 NFL Draft. And we were told that he'd be cleared to go by training camp. The Panthers were hoping that would be the case, but it has not been the case. He had to start off the season on PUP, the physically unable to perform list, meaning he was going to miss the first weeks of the season. So far, he's missed the first 6 weeks of the year, and we're wondering, will he be back anytime soon? According to Dave Canales, Jonathon Brooks, quote, he's checked all the boxes in terms of getting back to be able to practice. We're hoping to be able to open up that window today, saying that on Monday, we'll find out, I'm sure, here on Tuesday, maybe on Wednesday when they're actually back out there in practice. Tuesday is their off day, whether Jonathon Brooks is going to be out there, and he will have 21 days to be activated. If he's not, then he is done for the 2024 season. Joe Personally at Athletic asked Dave Canales all the things that we had heard about. A report telling us they'd be ready. Dan Morgan saying, Dave Canales saying they thought he'd be ready by training camp, and of course that not coming to fruition. So what happened? Dave went out here and said, quote, we had to take it in stride based on where he was at with his body readiness and his movements. We didn't feel like he was ready to clear some of those early stages. So we just had to keep doing the smartest thing for Jonathon first and foremost, and then think about the team and where he fits into the whole picture. So where does he fit in? That's what Dave Canales has asked. Quote, we'll have to see that come to life and see what he looks like in practice. So we'll find out today, maybe tomorrow, if Jonathon Brooks will be out there at practice this week for the first time in a Carolina Panthers uniform, actually in pads. If they do open up the window, again, that's 21 days. I would expect them to utilize the entirety of that window, as Dave Canales has talked about with some of these other guys like Dane Jackson, where you got to get back into football playing shape, have that readiness, those movements that they want to see, that confidence in your body and your ability to go out there and to make plays. And if he does not see that, well, he's not going to put somebody out there. And they're also not going to open up the window because you don't want to have somebody have the window open up on them and then they're still not ready to go. And then you have to actually have them out for the whole season, which I don't think is what they want to do at all when it comes to Jonathon Brooks. And seeing where things are at right now, sure, they could completely redshirt him, but also wouldn't you want to see just developmentally and for the hope's sake to see him out there on the field, maybe post-bye? Now, if they do open up the window this week, I would expect that they're going to utilize the entirety of that window again, and I would think that he's going to miss on Sunday at Washington, of course. He's going to miss at Denver, and I would not expect him to make his debut at home against New Orleans, which would then mean the game where he would have to be off of the 21-day ramp-up period and ready to go and make his season debut would be over in Munich against the Giants. It doesn't make the most sense to me to do that just with all the travel and all that's involved with that. Probably the best thing for the Panthers would to be sit here, let him sit for another week, open up the window next week, have him miss Washington, of course, because he'll still not be off PUP, but have him miss Denver, have him miss New Orleans, have him miss the Giants game. Then you have the bye, and then let him have his first game against Kansas City, because that still gives you, he's got another week to recover. He's got 3 full weeks to practice leading up to the Denver game, New Orleans, and also leading up to the game against the Giants. And then he has the bye and then another week to practice. So that gives him 5 weeks really to ramp up his body, get into shape, and be ready to go against Kansas City. Like that to me makes the most sense as far as the Panthers' decision-making about Jonathon Brooks, which they're discussing, which they did at least discuss on Monday. And we'll see what determination they come to. If they decide to open it up, expect him to make his debut against the Giants in Munich, and quite possibly before that against the Saints. But right now, as far as where does he fit, they don't need him. They got Chuba. He's been awesome. And Dave was asked about potentially trading Chuba Hubbard. He didn't really want to answer anything about that. Wanted to see what Jonathon Brooks looks like first. And I don't think they're going to see enough of Jonathon Brooks in the next couple of weeks prior to the trade deadline to decide that they're going to move on from Chuba Hubbard. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. I just don't think that makes sense. And if a team wants to trade for a running back, by all means, go ahead. We'll take whatever you can give us. But I still don't think that would be the smartest thing for the Panthers, considering Chuba Hubbard's been outstanding and really has been the one constant on their offense so far this season. Other injury updates, Dane Jackson has put in, quote, 2 fantastic weeks of practice, and he may be ready to go this Sunday. I would expect him to make his debut after those 2 weeks as he's getting close to his window being closed and the Panthers being a situation where, he'd be done for the rest of the season. So we'll see if that is actually the case. Sam Franklin, who broke his foot on the 3rd day of training camp, they're on that back together again Saturday inside Bank of America Stadium. He has been cleared to come back to practice. So that's a positive update for the Panthers, as he's been their best special teamer and one of the few players that Matt Rule brought in here that actually worked out. Jaden Crumedy is still in the return to play phase, but he is not ready to go just yet. DJ Wonnum is, quote, coming along. He still has a few things that he's got to clear in his final stage, and we'll see. Like Brooks, this feels like a guy that we're not going to see at the earliest until Kansas City, but really post-bye. Like that makes the most sense, and that's just a tough free agent signing where he's only going to get about 5 games to show. The Panthers should keep him around next season. We'll see what they decide to do. As we already know, edge rusher will be an area the Carolina Panthers have to absolutely address next offseason. Jadeveon Clowney with the shoulder, missed last week. He thought he would be able to play, was not ready. He currently is day-to-day. Taylor Moton, who missed last week, ending his Iron Man streak of 104 starts in a row and 120 games played in a row. He is getting a strength back in his tricep, according to Canales, and is also listed as day-to-day. Yosh Nijman and Brady Christensen had to step in on Sunday. Brady starting at center, Yosh starting at right tackle. Dave Canales asked about those two and how they performed as the offensive line. Gave up no sacks. He said that he thought they did a great job. They stepped up to the challenge and played really well against a good front. And the Carolina Panthers, looking at PFF, their pass blocking grade is 5th in the NFL. So it's dropped back a little bit from the number 2 ranking was a couple weeks ago. It's still 5th. And you've had to play Chandler Zavala, not just play him, but start Chandler Zavala in a game. They've had to start Brady Christensen and will continue to start Brady Christensen for the time being at center. And they had to start Yosh Nijman. You've had to play 8 different offensive linemen and your top 5 pass blocking in the NFL. Bravo. Love to see that. Absolutely outstanding for the Panthers. And looking at the game yesterday, Brady Christensen was the 3rd highest graded player on offense with a 76.0 grade. Yosh Nijman was the 5th highest graded player on offense with a 68.0 grade. So 2 guys stepping in as starters who are backups and being 2 of your top 5 highest graded guys on offense just speaks to the depth here on the offensive line. That was one of the questions I had going into the game. Just looking at their grades, limited sample size as far as pass blocking goes. Would the Panthers continue to play well, or would there be a drop off? And there was one bad snap. There was a holding penalty on Yosh Nijman, some issues there, but not necessarily anything that completely derailed what the Panthers did on Sunday and didn't lead to Andy Dalton being constantly under duress like we saw last year. So positives there from Dave Canales talking about the offensive line replacements and looking at the state of affairs here as far as injuries go heading into this week 7 matchup on the road against Washington. On Fridays, I give you my keys to victory, and on that following Monday, I go over how the Panthers did. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Football season is back, and the best way to get to games this fall is with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets of Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Every Friday throughout the season, I give you my keys to victory for the Panthers that Sunday. And on Mondays, we go back over those keys to victory. Key number 1 was to convert on 3rd down. Dave Canales said the Panthers the week prior were 0 of 7 on 3rd and manageable in that loss against Chicago, where the offense reverted back to what we saw week 1 and week 2 when Bryce Young was at the helm, but they did bounce back on Sunday, converting 5 of 11 on 3rd down. Not the most overwhelming numbers there. And when breaking it down, Dave Canales, speaking to the media on Monday, said that they were 0 for 4 on 3rd and 10 plus, and they were put behind the chains because of a couple of penalties. Ike Ekwonu had a false start on the opening drive of the game. That put the Panthers behind. And then right on the next play, Yosh Nijman kind of whiffed on a block there. Panthers were then looking at a 3rd and 13 after another successful Chuba Hubbard run to open up the game there on that 1st down and 10. So don't like to see that to open up the game. Then later on, Damian Lewis is called for a holding call that brought back a 9-yard Chuba Hubbard run when the Panthers were trying to drive deep into Falcons territory when they were down 25-17 right at the beginning of that 3rd quarter. Without that holding call, does Chuba get those yards? Maybe not, maybe, but still, that was a big play in that game because that pushes them back, and the Panthers have to settle for a field goal in a situation where they could have gone down there, scored a touchdown, gone for 2, been tied in maybe a completely different ball game on Sunday. They were also 5 of 7 on 3rd and 9 or less. So when they were in, that was not necessarily manageable, but when they were not super long, the Panthers were pretty successful on 3rd down on Sunday. The one other one that really that stands out to me is that 3rd and goal from the 5 against the Falcons. Well, of course, against the Falcons, but after the Falcons fumbled and Carolina having to settle for a field goal, that was a big piece of that game where you get that touchdown. Maybe you don't go for 2, but you're only down 1 point going to the half, and you're right there, level with Atlanta as far as 3 touchdowns in that first half, not able to get that 3rd down conversion from the 5 at the Atlanta Falcons. So that's not ideal, but overall, I thought they were pretty good on 3rd down, stayed on the field, and wasn't a massive issue. Number 2 was to get out the field on defense. The Carolina Panthers entered the game allowing 46.88% of opponents to convert their they allowed 46.88 3rd down conversion, which is 29th in the league. The Falcons were 6 of 12 yesterday in that game, but that counts the field goal when they're already up 35-20, where they ran the ball on 3rd and 6, and then also counted the kneel down after they got the ball back on that interception by Clark Phillips. So really they were 6 of 10, which that's 60%. Not great by the Panthers when it came to 3rd down defense. Panthers entered the game last in red zone defense, allowing 87.5% of those red zone trips to end in a touchdown. The Falcons were 4 of 8 on Sunday, so only 50%. 3 of 3, though, in the first half, which helped them lead that game, was one of the big differences and why the Panthers were down at halftime. Really, though, kind of like the 3rd down conversion rate, the Falcons were actually 4 of 6 in the red zone. The field goal that happened when they were up 35-20, they weren't trying to score a touchdown really unless it came on the ground. And then there was also the kneel down. Both those impacted the numbers. So if you want to say 4 of 7, sure, but really 4 of 6 when the game was still in the balance and they were actually trying to score, and probably should have been 5 of 6 in those situations, as Darnell Mooney was wide open and just lost his feet. And had he stayed on his feet, that's a touchdown. Panthers got lucky there as they had to kick a field goal on that drive. Panthers also came in the game allowing their opponents to score on 50.9% of their drives this season. Looking at the drive chart yesterday, it was punt, touchdown, fumble, touchdown, touchdown, end of half for Atlanta, field goal, touchdown, field goal, end of game. So every drive in the second half, they scored on, except for the one where they were kneeling it down. And really, they could have scored on that pick 6. So 9 true possessions, not counting the end of half there before the halftime. There were 7 seconds left, and then not counting down when they're kneeling it down. So 9 real possessions ended, 7 of them ended in scores. So that's 77%. Not ideal. The Panthers are now allowing their opponents to score on 52.9% of their drives this season, which now is last in the NFL as they surpass the Falcons, who entered into that game allowing 52.1% of their opponents to score on their drives, and that was worse in the NFL. Panthers now worse in the NFL in that category, so they definitely did not succeed when it came to getting out the field in that loss on Sunday. And at number 3, got to limit turnovers, enter the game with 13.6 of the drives ending in turnovers on offense. That was 6th most in the NFL. They're now up to 14% of their drives, which is now 5th most in the league. Opponents enter the game with 44 points off turnovers, with the Panthers 6. Andy Dalton, his interception was a backbreaker. Dave Canales said that there were choices to be made on that play where the Panthers could have kept playing football. The choice that Andy Dalton made was throw the ball to Ian Thomas, who had his route undercut by AJ Terrell, and that was effectively the game because the Falcons went right down the field, 9 plays, 84 yards, 70 of which coming on the ground, and the Panthers had nothing to do for Tyler Algier and for Bijan Robinson on that drive, and that ended things right there, 35-20. And then Carolina comes back, goes turnover on downs. So tough to see. Now, looking at so far this season, Saints have 13 points off turnovers. Chargers have 7. Bengals had 7. Bears had 17. The Falcons, rather, had 7. It could have been 14 had Clark Phillips decided to not fall down, which was a smart thing to do, and he could have taken it back there for the pick 6. So really, it would have been 14. Opponents now are leading the Panthers 51-9 when it comes to points off turnovers against each other so far this season. And that really right there is the big difference. The Panthers against the Bengals, they get an interception and they don't turn it into 7. The Bengals did. The Saints, The Falcons, rather. God, I wrote down Saints in my notes. That's why I keep saying it. The Falcons, they get that interception. They cashed it into 7. The other one they could have done as well. And the Panthers, they get that fumble. Great play by Trevor Wallace. And they settle for 3 points again. Like, that has been a recurring theme. We talk about complementary football all the time. Is the defense playing complementary football towards the offense? Absolutely not. But the offense is also not helping the defense either when they're not able to turn those few takeaways into touchdowns so far this season. So the Panthers struggled again with that as they lost that game, the backbreaking interception against the Falcons on Sunday in that 38-20 loss. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, I'll be back answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for tomorrow's weekly Wednesday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.